Okay, so it's been a good bit since I've covered Jiraiya in a video, and probably even longer since I've covered Jiraiya in a solo video, since today's topic. So now the structure of today's video is going to cover two separate times within the series, the end of part 1 and the beginning of Shippuden, as these are really the only times I would see this scenario taking place in. But real quick, if you haven't yet, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps me out and inspires me to keep making these versus battle videos and what ifs. I can't tell y'all enough how much I appreciate the support y'all have given the past few months. Y'all are the best. Never forget that. I hope you do enjoy today's video. That said, let's get into it. So as I mentioned, the time periods in which this would happen is either the end of part 1, but right before the Sasuke retrieval arc, and the beginning of Shippuden. And without getting into semantics about where Jiraiya gets the information on where Orochimaru's hideout is, let's just say for the sake of the video that he locates it and decides to take it upon himself to infiltrate the hideout and try to kill Orochimaru. When it comes to the version of Jiraiya I'm going to be using for this video, it'll technically be Jiraiya from part 1, and I say technically because even though this is pre-Shippuden, we're still going to give him the arsenal that he had during his fight with Pain. As Jiraiya's overall skill set doesn't really change from part 1 to Shippuden, I don't think too many people are going to give me crap for that, as I would think that's fair and goes without saying, but just in case there are people who think I shouldn't use that, I'm sorry, but that's what I'm going with. Besides, it's pretty much implied that the main reason Jiraiya couldn't do as well as he probably would have in a 3-way deadlock fight was because he was drugged and nerfed and thereby couldn't use his full arsenal. Moving forward, the best way to describe how this video is going to go down is pretty much by saying it might be a gauntlet style. Like, it may end up being that Jiraiya has to encounter certain enemies at certain times, one after the other. But in both scenarios, I'm going to cover how it'll be in the gauntlet style and what if he had to fight everyone at once. So, assuming Orochimaru might have some henchmen left over from the Konoha invasion, they might be the first thing Jiraiya ends up running into, and he might have to go through a few of them, which I think we can all agree that's not going to be much of an issue for Jiraiya, like, at all. I'd go so far as to say that one Jiraiya clone could take them all out, no problem. Now, this is no shade on Asuma at all, but if he can go through 9 of them with no trouble whatsoever, Jiraiya will likely just sneeze them away.
I know some people might think that Orochimaru will bring out some of his experiments that he has locked up in his cages or whatever, and while that's also like a fair assumption to make, I don't really know how to assess how each one would do, since we've never really seen what they're actually capable of outside of like maybe a couple, including Yamato. So for the sake of this video and for the sake of conversation and simplicity, we're going to take all those experiments off the table in this scenario.
The next encounter would likely have to be the Sound 4. Now, if it's just the 4 of them, they're not posing much of a threat for Jiraiya. I mean, Genma and Raito together were able to push them to use CS2 and almost beat them. And Genma and Raito are pretty impressive in their own right, being handpicked by Minato to be his bodyguards, but Jiraiya is definitely above them by a pretty good margin. To top it all off, they were also either on a mission or coming back from one, so it's implied they weren't even at top shape. Now, what I will say, that since they are in a hideout, Jiraiya can't exactly summon Gamabunta. Well, I mean, he could, but since this is an infiltration mission, I doubt he would want to summon Gamabunta and destroy the whole hideout at risk of letting Orochimaru get away. But I mean, he'd likely not even need Gamabunta, and besides which, there's a chance that with Gamabunta's restriction, that it'll likely be the same thing for the summoning for the Sound 4. Meaning Kidomaru's giant spider, Tayuya's flute puppets, Sakon's Rashomon Gate, and Jirobo's Sphere of Graves, which isn't really a summoning, but it's pretty large in scale. They all might be taken off the table too. But if we say for a second that there's an area within the hideout that would allow for those type of summonings, and say everyone just whips out their respective summoning all at once, then Jiraiya still should be good. Even if you want to restrict Jiraiya to just summoning Gamabunta when it comes to the large-scale toads, Jiraiya can still summon Monpaw and a couple of the medium-sized toads to help too. And they should be plenty enough to help Jiraiya with the Sound 4 and their summons. Base Jiraiya should be able to one-shot Jirobo with a Rasengan. At worst, he goes straight into Sage Mode real quick and hits him with a Sage Rasengan, and he's clapped. With Kidomaru, his range attacks are pretty impressive, but even if Jiraiya's long-range jutsus aren't enough to combat them, which I feel like they definitely should be, he should be fast enough to dodge them, especially if he's already in Sage Mode. The giant spider might prove annoying with its webs and all, but Jiraiya can use his needle Jizo to cut them like no trouble, which is also a counter for Sakon if he tries to blitz him. If Ukon tries to invade his body the same way he did against Kiba, Jiraiya could actually absorb nature energy around him and turn Ukon to a frog. Worst case scenario, he does what Kiba does and stabs himself. And if Kiba can take a kunai stab, then Jiraiya should be able to also. Taiyuya's genjutsu actually might pose a problem, but if Jiraiya is caught and is able to still absorb nature energy, maybe doing so could break the hold the genjutsu has on him. I'm not 100% sure. Don't take that with a grain of salt. But I mean, if Shikamaru could break out of it by doing something as small as breaking his own finger to release the jutsu, then Jiraiya could just bite his lip or something, similar to how Kurenai did to break the genjutsu reflection Itachi pulled on her. Of course, that's all assuming Jiraiya would even get caught in the genjutsu in the first place, and also assuming Ma and Pa aren't there on the field to break him out. Taiyuya's flute summons shouldn't be much of an issue, as Ma and Pa together could probably just deal with them with no trouble, given how strong they are. Plus, if Jiraiya is quick enough, as soon as the Sound 4 enter his field of vision, Jiraiya could use Dark Swamp or something similar to sink them and one-shot them with Giant Rasengan. Maybe that's a Jiraiya Wank or a Sound 4 Diss, either one, but I could see it totally happening. After all, given how ones like Sakon and Taiyuya were ultimately beaten by things like Konkuro's puppet knives and a single attack from Temari, granted, the attack was impressive, was able to destroy the entire area around them, but still, then Jiraiya, if he can get them in a position and with a Genjutsu or Dark Swamp and hit them with a Giant Rasengan at the same time, it should be game over. Moving on, so at this point, Kabuto might end up using Kimimaro as a last resort and have him go take Jiraiya on. And unfortunately, for Kimimaro, he might be done for. I know Kimimaro is strong, but given that this is weakened Kimimaro, who was literally at death's door, and if we assume Jiraiya hasn't expended too much of his chakra in dealing with the other Sound 4, then I'm sure he'd save enough to deal with Kimimaro. Now, what I will say is that even though this is sick Kimimaro, I still think he's physically stronger than Jiraiya in base with his Keke Genkai bone density, and it would maybe push him to use Sage Mode, especially if Kimimaro goes straight into CS2 from the jump, which I actually don't think that's being unrealistic because I'm sure Kimimaro knows who Jiraiya is, and if he feels this guy is on the same level as Orochimaru, yeah, he's going to go all out from the beginning. Once Jiraiya sees Kimimaro is in CS2, he'll likely decide to go in Sage Mode, and if he enters Sage Mode, it's a wrap. At worst, Jiraiya can defend against Kimimara's attack long enough for him to, kick the bucket. Now, granted, if Kimimaro uses his Bracken Dance, which is the one he uses where he floods the entire area with his bones from underground, then, yeah, maybe that can catch Jiraiya off guard. But if Gar in Part 1 can react quick enough in time to get airborne, then I'm sure Jiraiya will have the reaction time needed to either use a kunai rope or one of the toad's tongues to pull himself from the ground. Now, if we rewind for a second and say that Kabuto decides to send Kimimaro with the other Sound 4 as backup, then it might prove a little bit more of a challenge for Jiraiya. But then again, Dark Swamp or Genjutsu, the argument still is, applied here. If he hits them with it and catches them in a Genjutsu or uses Dark Swamp and sinks them and hits them with a Giant Rasengan, then the only one who has a chance of surviving is Kimimaro. And if that is the case, it's just going to play out, like I said earlier, just, worse for Kimimaro. And at that point, if we assume Orochimaru hasn't run off, then the last thing Orochimaru has is Kabuto. Now, I don't want to downplay Kabuto here, because he did give Tsunade some trouble, but he's not beating Jiraiya. Plus, he gave Tsunade some trouble because Tsunade is mainly a melee fighter, where Jiraiya has a plethora of long-range jutsu to combat Kabuto's melee fighting. The only possible arguments I can think of is one, depending on how much chakra Jiraiya has at this point, and two, if Kabuto can summon Manda. With the first one, I can't see Jiraiya running that low to the point where he can't deal with Kabuto, especially if he summoned Ma and Pa and they're already on the field and they're tagging along with him. They're likely going to be able to beat him. And for the second argument, if we're doing this chronologically, then Manda might still have a hole in his mouth from the three-way deadlock fight. And judging by how he was talking to Orochimaru and Kabuto when the fight was over, yeah, I don't think he'll be in the mood to fight Jiraiya or any of the Toad summons. So it's safe to say that Kabuto is likely getting taken out at this point. And at that point, Orochimaru is probably done for. We saw how bad of shape he was in at the end of the Sasuke retrieval arc, and he needed to transfer to a new body. So his original body probably wouldn't be in any condition to fight Jiraiya. So either Jiraiya decides to try to capture Orochimaru or kill him. Now, asterisk on this, because it's all assuming Orochimaru would not have, flee the hideout by this point. which is totally likely. I know people are probably in the comments like Orochimaru wouldn't just stay there. He would leave just like he did during the three-way deadlock fight. I get that. But I'm just trying to see like how this would go down and like maybe, you know, putting Orochimaru's like faith in his henchmen or something like that into this. I don't really know, but or maybe he's like thinks he could deal with Jiraiya on his own, but given the state he was in and during the Sasuke retrieval mission, I don't think so. So going on to the second part of the video, and if we say that this is a role reversal or a switch up and say that Jiraiya goes to the Teiji Bridge instead of Team Kakashi, and skipping the semantics of the whole posing as sorcery part, because we can say that Jiraiya still does that or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The point is, he still encounters Kabuto and Orochimaru at the bridge. Now, if we're being realistic, in character, I don't think Kabuto will be getting involved. I think Orochimaru would likely take on Jiraiya by himself. I mean, if he was willing to go toe-to-toe with a Four Tails Naruto, then I think Orochimaru would actually be excited about the prospect of fighting Jiraiya again. Speaking of Four Tails Naruto, that's where I like to start this whole thing off, as a lot of people do scale Jiraiya to Orochimaru based off their respective encounters with Four Tails. So people will sometimes say that Orochimaru is still stronger than Jiraiya, even without his arms, because Orochimaru did better in his encounter than Jiraiya did. And while that isn't necessarily wrong, as we do see Orochimaru at certain points of the fight actually straight up just box with Four Tails Naruto, there are things to consider when talking about who did better. Because despite Jiraiya saying that he was almost killed by the Four Tails, we don't really see how the encounter went in specific. After all, it was during a time when they would have been training, and the emergence of the fourth tail and the cloak itself may have surprised Jiraiya, and that's why he was caught off guard and attacked by Naruto. And say for a second that they actually did fight, obviously Jiraiya isn't going to want to seriously injure or accidentally kill Naruto. So obviously I'm aware Orochimaru did do better in his respective tussle with the Four Tails, but even that said, I still think those are factors to consider when scaling Jiraiya and Orochimaru here. Now, that said, I know there's a filler scene that depicts this very fight between Naruto and Jiraiya, as it shows Jiraiya is trying to put a ceiling tag on the Four Tails, and Naruto just kind of one-shots him before he gets a chance to. But the scene ends there, because the scene right after it, we see them both in the hospital, so it's never really shown if and how Jiraiya managed to suppress the Four Tails. So if you do take that scene as canon to this power scaling, then yeah, I guess Orochimaru may scale higher than Jiraiya, at least in base. Now, even without his arms, I think Orochimaru would likely press Jiraiya enough to force him to use Sage Mode. Whether or not you feel like Jiraiya could enter Sage Mode in time is arguable, as Orochimaru could possibly have Kabuto summon Manda to help, but then Jiraiya can respond by summoning Gamabunta too. And I think he'd also summon Mappa, like they would be extremely helpful here, especially with using Frog Song to keep Orochimaru at bay long enough to help him enter Sage Mode. Now, I want to say that Jiraiya kind of stomps armless Orochimaru in Sage Mode, and I think he gives him a lot of trouble, but there's also a case that Orochimaru can like never be injured, as he just vomits himself out of bodies once he's taken serious damage. So I don't really know if there's an actual way to kill Orochimaru just through raw damage. Granted, a Sage Art Giant Rasengan could possibly do the trick, but it's also worth noting that Orochimaru might be able to summon the Rashomon Gates in time before Jiraiya could hit him, meaning that the best option for Jiraiya would have to be sealing Orochimaru. And with Jiraiya at least being knowledgeable of sealing ninjutsu, maybe he'd think of one that would work against Orochimaru. Take that with a grain of salt though, since I don't really know specifically which sealing jutsu Jiraiya could or would use here. So if we go off the side of that either the Sage Art Rasengan isn't able to land on Orochimaru, or if Jiraiya doesn't have a sealing jutsu that would work on Orochimaru, then the mission is a failure. But if we go on the side that either one of them do work, and Jiraiya can either capture or kill Orochimaru, then Jiraiya may likely try to follow up and try to find Sasuke at Orochimaru's hideout. And before we go any further, keep in mind y'all that scaling Orochimaru in burst battle videos is not my forte, because he's kind of weird for me to scale. So for example, if you think I'm hyping Orochimaru's rebirthing technique too much, by all means let me know. It's just, to me, that's how I've always looked at it. It just seems like Orochimaru just can't be killed or beaten unless you seal him somehow. Similar to how Itachi did. Like, we didn't see the end of Orochimaru even after Sasuke quote-unquote killed him. It was only until Itachi sealed him with the Totsuka blade that we got rid of Orochimaru, and even then, he was technically still alive with an Anko having a curse mark. So yeah, I hope you all understand my point on this, and if you do disagree with my take on Orochimaru, then please just keep that in mind. Anyway, moving forward. If Jiraiya decides to pursue further and tries to capture Sasuke as well, I'll be honest, I'm not sure it goes well. Because at this point, Jiraiya may or may not have expended too much chakra in fighting Orochimaru to take on Sasuke. So fighting Sasuke here would definitely be not easy at all. Besides, if we assume that Kabuto fled by this time, he'll likely go to Sasuke and tell him what happened, and honestly, I think Sasuke wouldn't initially go try to encounter Jiraiya. Like, he'd probably just be like, alright, well, there wasn't much Orochimaru had left to teach me anyway, so time for me to just go find my new team. I know some people might think that Sasuke would fight him in order to test his skills, but I don't know. I personally wouldn't get that impression from Sasuke. As a matter of fact, he kind of says to Orochimaru when Sasuke kills him, and Orochimaru makes Sasuke remember what Itachi said to Sasuke before Itachi left the village. Like, hurting people and or sacrificing people just to test the limits of their own ability or something like that. And Sasuke just straight up tells Orochimaru, like, you disgust me, and proceeds to try to kill Orochimaru. So yeah, I feel like if Sasuke doesn't have to, he'll likely just not engage Jiraiya and just bail. Now, since some people would probably like me to discuss a hypothetical Sasuke versus Jiraiya in this video, let's say for a second that Jiraiya managed to infiltrate the hideout before he fights Orochimaru and he encounters Sasuke first. How would things go down? Now, for the sake of this section of the video, we can say that Orochimaru wants to see if Sasuke could take Jiraiya on, like maybe seeing how strong Sasuke has gotten. So, in other words, Orochimaru isn't involved. Now, I think this goes without saying, but this is probably going to be a battle that's fought without killer intent. Like, obviously, Jiraiya isn't going to want to kill Sasuke. And some people might disagree with me, but I don't think Sasuke would want to kill Jiraiya either, even if Jiraiya engaged him first. Like, for starters, Sasuke would probably be aware that Jiraiya is trying to capture him, not kill him. So Sasuke wouldn't necessarily have to fight in self-defense like he did with Deidara. Speaking of Deidara, he was willing to let he and Toby go if they told him where Itachi was. So if he's willing to let two S-rank criminals go, yeah, I'd say that he'd likely not want to kill Jiraiya of all people, especially if he's aware of the relationship he has with Naruto. Again, I know some people will probably disagree and say, well, Sasuke was prepared to drop Kirin on Team Kakashi and kill him. And, I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, but I've never really agreed with that scene because it completely contradicts Heavy Sasuke's character. Like, this is the same guy who is still holding on to principles he had from the Leaf Village days. Suigetsu even calls him out on this during a filler scene where Sasuke tells him he'll help him get the Executioner's Blade, but under the rule of no killing. And Suigetsu literally says, boy, you really are from the Hidden Leaf. All this is to say that they're probably not going to be trying to kill each other in this fight, and their respective ultimate moves, that is Kirin and Giant Rasengan, are likely taken off the table. Now, having said all that, I do think Jiraiya would still resort to using Sage Mode, and in fact, he'll likely have to in order to fight Sasuke. Now, Sasuke does note to Karin later on that the main reason he was able to beat Orochimaru was because Orochimaru was already weakened. And if Jiraiya is at the very least relative to Orochimaru, then Sasuke will definitely have a fight on his hands, especially if he's going to be fighting without killer intent. So there are two aspects to this fight that I think are going to be canceled out between these two fighters: Fire Style Ninjutsu and speed/reaction time. I'll start with the Fire Style argument. They both have boasted a pretty impressive Fire Style Ninjutsu feats, and a part of me does want to lean more towards Sasuke having an edge in Fire Style, because, I mean, the Uchiha are known to excel at Fire Style, as noted by Kakashi. But then, Jiraiya was trained by Hiruzen, whose clan also specializes in Fire Style Jutsu, which is why I feel like they might cancel each other out. So with Fire Style, it may be up to discretion. I personally would lean a little bit towards Sasuke, but I'm willing to believe that Jiraiya might also edge him out. Speed and reaction time is something that might be canceled out too. This is going to be more in regards to Jiraiya in Sage Mode. So Sasuke with his base Sharingan was able to react to the Raikage's elbow bolt at full speed. And even in Sage Mode, Jiraiya isn't quite that fast in terms of travel speed. But then on the other hand, we see that a Sage Naruto clone in the War Arc was fast enough to react to the third Raikage's spear attack. Now, I know this was a War Arc Naruto who had perfect Sage Mode, but it was also a clone, and it was also against someone who's definitely faster than this Sasuke, who couldn't even hit Deidara at point blank. So I think it kind of evens out. Now, Sasuke does have Curse Mark to help him in this as well, But with that, it's likely he can only stay in CM2 for so long. As Sakon notes to Sasuke in part 1, the longer he stays in CM2, the greater the risk of permanently staying that way is. So honestly, with CM2 and Jiraya's incomplete Sage Mode, it might end up being a stalemate, with Jiraiya's Sage Mode having a slight edge since the curse mark is like basically a knockoff version of Sage Mode. Jiraiya will probably have an edge in that. As far as the win cons go, an argument that I've heard in Jiraiya's case that is actually pretty sound is that Jiraiya can use the Toad Stomach Trap that he used on Itachi and Kasame. And with this Sasuke not having Amaterasu yet, his regular fire style might not be strong enough to penetrate. But there are two counter arguments to this as well. One, there's a chance that Chidori is likely strong enough to break through the stomach, and the counter argument to that counter argument is that Jiraiya was pretty convinced that no one could break through it, and by this time Jiraiya hadn't seen Amaterasu yet, but he had seen Chidori from Kakashi. The second counter argument is that if Jiraiya used this Toad Stomach Trap, Sasuke can summon Manda to outright break him out or reverse summon out. Maybe if Ma and Pa are already summoned by this point, they could use the Frog Song if they are quick enough to use it, that is, to trap Sasuke as soon as Jiraiya uses the Toad Stomach Jutsu. Speaking of Genjutsu, if Sasuke uses it on Jiraiya, it could be a problem, but if Ma and Pa are already summoned, then they could break him out as well. When it comes to battle IQ and tactics, I think they also might cancel each other out, but with Sasuke having a slight edge, like Jiraiya is obviously a pretty good tactician in his own right, but that comes from more wisdom through experience, whereas Sasuke is just more of a natural tactician. Now, the fight might depend on if Jiraiya could enter Sage Mode in time. With no concrete knowledge of Jiraiya having Sage Mode, it might give Jiraiya the slight advantage of time in order to enter Sage Mode, especially if he uses clones and summons some toads to help, and or Ma or Pa. But again, with Sasuke being pretty intelligent himself, I think it's just as likely that he might pick up on what's going on, especially if he has his Sharingan active.
I did also forget to bring up Chidori's stream that Sasuke does have, which will definitely help him in this fight. It will have to keep Jiraiya at bay a couple times within the fight. But as soon as Jiraiya sees that, I can see Jiraiya maybe working around some long-range jutsu to help. Maybe Ma and Pa will actively use, Frog Song after seeing that they can't really get close to Sasuke all that much with Chidori's stream. So I did want to bring up Chidori's stream, as that is definitely a problem. And by extension, the Chidori Simbone could pose a problem too, especially for Ma and Pa. As we see, Sasuke is pretty good as far as accuracy when it comes to small targets, just like Datara's nanobots. So, in all honesty, I'm not, too sure that Sasuke wouldn't be able to actually hit Ma and Pa with them. But if he's trying not to kill them, then he likely won't try to use that.
So with all this said, and my conclusion to this particular fight, I can see him going on one of two ways. Without killer intent, if Jiraiya isn't able to enter Sage Mode, I think Sasuke might hold the edge. Still high diff if Ma and Pa are helping Jiraiya, but if Jiraiya is able to enter Sage Mode, then I believe he'll hold the edge over Sasuke. But this is a hypothetical situation, and assuming Orochimaru wouldn't get involved, as in, if he probably will as soon as he sees Sasuke is either losing or at risk of being captured. And I think we can all agree that if Kabuto and Orochimaru step in to help, especially if the fight has gone on for a bit, then Jiraiya will likely have to retreat. As a 1v3 between him, Orochimaru, Kabuto, and Sasuke, it wouldn't go so well.
Now, before anyone gets triggered, I'm not saying that even if that was the case, that Jiraiya wouldn't be able to perform pretty well in a 1v3 between him, Orochimaru, Sasuke, and Kabuto. I'm just saying that if the fight has gone on long enough to where Jiraiya's had to expend a lot of his chakra and Orochimaru and Kabuto step in at that point, it will be pretty tough for Jiraiya to actually get a win against all three of them. I think at best he gets Kabuto and either Sasuke or Orochimaru, but one of those three is probably going to be able to beat Jiraiya at that point. That's all I'm saying.
Now, I do think with Ma and Pa and Gamabunta to help, there could give him more of a chance of retreating by way of reverse summoning. So Jiraiya survives, but the infiltration mission fails. But on the right side, Jiraiya does have intel on Sasuke's abilities to bring back to Naruto, so there's that. But there is part 2 to this. There is the rest of the video. I know this one was like really random for me to do. I haven't talked about Jiraiya in a long time, and I haven't talked about Orochimaru in probably even longer because, like I said, he's really weird for me to scale. But I think more people may or may not give me more crap about the Sasuke versus Jiraiya fight. I don't know. At this point, I think, without killer intent, it is kind of hard to gauge where this fight would go. Maybe sometime in the future, I'll do another hypothetical versus battle video between these two. Again, looking at, without killer intent and with killer intent. But for right now, that's going to be the rest of the video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Please let me know in the comments what y'all think. Please remember to like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click the bell for more notifications. Until the next one, LightningSnow, out.